Good morning, Team Alabama. The camera stopped, and we are continuing with page 114 down at the bottom in the lottery rows. Please find it on page 114. There was nothing that pleased Robin so much as feeding the ducks. He grew wildly excited as he watched them approach the shore, eager for their treat. And he squatted and rose repeatedly, making an awkward attempt at jumping up and down. Georgie kept a firm grip on the child's shirt as Robin walked a little way out into the water, screaming partly in delight, partly in fear, as one of the ducks snatched at a piece of bread Georgie held out to them. Georgie had to wait until every duck had given up hope of anything more to eat and had paddled away before Robin was willing to leave the lakeshore. Robin walked more steadily than he had the year before, and Mr. Collier mentioned that, but he still held tightly to Georgie's hand, looking back at the ducks occasionally and babbling happily as he and Georgie approached the banyan tree. Slowly, Georgie began to understand Robin's incoherent attempts at talking, which so often puzzled his grandfather. "Do you understand him, Georgie? What is he trying to tell us?" Mr. Collier would often ask, and more often Georgie was able to interpret. "He wants me to build a house for the birds," Georgie reported one day. He shook his head, frowning. "I'm not very good at building things," he said. "I don't think I know how to build a birdhouse." "It isn't the house that is important, Georgie. It's the work of building it," Mr. Collier said, and that proved to be true. Robin didn't care that a birdhouse failed to grow out of the scraps of wood that old Eddie found for them. It was enough that he learned with Georgie's help to hit a nail so that it would stand, however unsteadily, in one of the pieces of soft wood. The fun of pounding nail after nail while Georgie stood at his side was enough to bring contentment to Robin's world. More and more often he looked at Georgie for comfort when a finger was hurt or a knee skinned or when he was frightened by a sudden thunderbolt. He began to stand at the south side of the garden every afternoon watching for Georgie to appear when the boys came running out of school after classes were over. For Georgie, it was a wonderful thing to know that Robin loved him. He would have gladly spent all of his free hours at Robin's side. But Mr. Collier, watching them play together for hours each day, shook his head. "We can't allow Robin to demand all of your time and attention, Georgie. He loves you, and I'm happy about that. But you must be with boys your own age more often. We hire Amanda to take care of Robin, and she can help him feed the ducks and pound nails. You must do things with your friends." And so, little by little, Georgie began spending more time at school. Because he was alert and quick, he became a regular on the baseball team made up of the younger boys in the school. He enjoyed swimming, too, and learning quickly with Sister Monica's help. It was in the swimming pool, though, that his first fight in his new school had its beginnings. The boys stripped to their waists when they went into the pool, and they beat their chests with a Tarzan yells and felt the hot sun baking their backs browner and browner each day. Sister Monica had never said they must strip to the waist, only that it was all right if they wanted to. Georgie asked if he could wear his shirt, and she said okay. One day, however, when she was busy at the other end of the pool, Richie Barnes took it upon himself to see that Georgie stripped as the others did. "Take that shirt off when you come in this pool, fellow," he roared, throwing handfuls of water up into Georgie's face. "I won't do it," Georgie answered. "It's none of your business about my shirt." Richie knew how to make his eyes narrow, and it gave him a fierce look that worked sometimes with the 7-year-olds when he tried to bully them. "You take that shirt off, you Tampa bum, or I'll take it off for you," he bellowed. Bellowed might be a great word to add to your vocab. Approaching Georgie, who stepped out of the pool and waited for Richie, his fists clenched. It wasn't a long fight, but it was a rough one, which lasted only until Sister Monica grasped a handful of wet hair on either head and led the combatants inside the gym. When they dried off, When they dried off enough to prevent dripping, she escorted them to Sister Mary Angela's office. It was the first time Georgie had been led into the office for a scolding. He wouldn't look at Sister Mary Angela. She was neither angry nor bothered, just cool. I see you've given Richie a black eye, Georgie. It's rather dangerous and painful to get a black eye, isn't it? Georgie knew that she was asking him to remember the many times that his own eyes had been dangerously and painfully blackened. He nodded without raising his eyes. She turned then to Richie. And people who insist upon butting into other people's business can expect to be roughed up a little, eh, Richie? It was such a dumb thing to get mad about, Richie spluttered. Sister Monica always tells us that we can take off our shirts before we go in the pool. Why does Georgie have to think he's different? Sister Monica tells me that you're a very good swimmer, Richie, she remarked without answering the question. Richie glowed, black eye and all. Yes, I am, he acknowledged. I'm the best in our class. Well, if I were a young man who may be swimming in the Olympics someday, I think that I'd give my attention to practice rather than trying to boss someone else around about whether or not he wears a shirt while he's in swimming. She leaned her elbows on the desk and regarded the boys frostily. So, attend to your business, Mr. Barnes, and you may wear your shirt in the pool, Mr. Burgess. Just be careful about using those fists too freely from now on. With that, she dismissed them, but Sister Monica made them both get dressed and go to their rooms until lunchtime. That afternoon, Timothy and Georgie took a long walk through the woods and finally around to the lake shore, and Timothy was thoughtful and sober. I know Richie is a stinker, Georgie. All of us think he is when he gets into a mean groove. But I don't understand. Why did you get so mad about that shirt deal? I don't want to talk about it, Georgie answered, and walked on with his head lowered. I don't blame you for blacking his eye, but I've been wondering about it too. Why do you always wear a shirt in the pool when none of the rest of us do? That's none of your business, Tim. Georgie felt sorry to be talking to Timothy like that, but he had to stop the questioning if he could. They had reached the banyan tree and seated themselves for a rest in Paul's playhouse. I thought me and you was friends, Georgie, Timothy remarked. We are, Georgie answered. Well, look, if I'm your friend, why can't you tell me why wearing a shirt in the pool is so gosh awful important to you? Georgie looked straight into Timothy's eyes for a long time, and then he slowly made up his mind about something that had never quite lost its terror for him. To Timothy he said, You won't ever tell? No, of course not. Georgie drew a long breath. All right then, I'll show you because you're my friend. But if you ever tell anyone, I'll hate you and I'll never be your friend again. As he spoke, he slowly unbuttoned his shirt and, throwing it aside, allowed Timothy to see his mutilated back. Timothy gasped. What happened to you, Georgie? What made your back like that? Georgie swallowed hard before he spoke. There was a man in Tampa, he said finally, and he hated me, and I was afraid of him, and he knowed it, and so he liked to hurt me, and every time he came to the apartment, he took off his belt and whipped me. Sometimes he used a stick. You asked me once how I got my arm hurt. Steve broke it with the leg of a chair he smashed. Georgie's heart beat fast. At last he had done it. He had defied his mother's warnings, and he dared an invisible Steve to leap out from some hiding place and kill him on the spot. A wave of fear ran through him in spite of the fact that he knew here at the school he was safely hidden from Steve, and that there were people around to protect him even if Steve should suddenly appear. After a minute, though, he felt stronger, and he looked up calmly into Timothy's stricken face. Didn't your dad and Mom call the police, Georgie? Didn't your dad hit the man? Timothy asked. I don't have any dad that I know about, and my mother liked Steve. Sometimes she helped him tie me up in the closet. Oh, no. Oh, no. Timothy could think of nothing more to say. His own mother loved him a lot, and sometimes more than he wanted to be loved when other people were around, and his father was dead. But Timothy was able to remember a big man who played games with him and who never failed to bring home a present when he had been away for a few days. He stared at Georgie. I didn't know there was people that mean in all the world, he muttered. There is, though, except maybe now Steve's dead. I hope he is. I hope so, too. They were silent then, as Georgie drew on his shirt again. But it wasn't your fault, Georgie, Timothy said after a while. Why couldn't you let the other guys know how it happened? They'd feel as mad about it as I do. I guess I'm ashamed, he finished buttoning his shirt and added brusquely, I still don't like to talk about it, Tim. They started up the sloping path that led to the Harpers' big white house and to the garden, and no longer forbidden to Georgie or to any occasional friend of his. They didn't say anything at first, and then seeing Robin watching them at the gate, they broke into a run to see who could reach him first. Inside the yard, they made a saddle with their clasped hands and gave the delighted little boy a ride around the garden, stopping to admire Georgie's rosebush and to count the red blooms upon it. All of them laughed noisily and yelled at times, but in a secret part of Georgie's mind, everything was quiet and peaceful like the garden was in the early part of the night. He was glad that Timothy knew about his back, and he was sure that Timothy would never mention it again. Why was Georgie at peace? Why don't you put that as a fact right now? That's the end of chapter 9. Have a great rest of your day, Team Alabama.